Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, and that's New Comic Book Day, a term that takes on a little bit of complications in a country where not all new comics are being released on the same day anymore, and in where most of the country is bracing to shut down all of its non-essential businesses either once or for the second time because of an out-of-control pandemic. So I have not been going to comic shops to collect anything, whether it's new issues or the older collections that I really, really enjoy. I do look at online listings to see what's scheduled to come out to comic shops on any given Wednesday. And there was one thing today that I very, very much want. It's a volume of, it's a hardcover collection, reprint collection of Superboy, a celebration of the character over 75 years. But I would have hesitated to buy that at a comic shop anyway, because I can order it for a lot less money, for half the price, either at remainder houses online that have it for that price right away, or at Barnes & Noble, where I get an employee discount that's fairly hefty. So I might not have got that today. I might have popped in anyway just to see the staff and maybe buy a few peripherals. But instead, I thought I would just keep doing what we've been doing all year long, which is to look at back issues. And the first back issue stars Superboy, but it necessitates some clarification because Superboy is a complicated character now in DC continuity. It used to be very simple. The concept for Superboy 75 years ago was very simple. These are the adventures of Clark Kent when he was a teenager in Smallville. So he was wearing the super costume, the indestructible super costume with a big red cape. He had his super dog, Krypto, by his side. But he was in small-town America. He had not yet become Superman. They were the adventures of Superman when he was a boy. That character I fell in love with. I absolutely loved Superboy in the early 1950s and all through the 50s, really. Thought the character was just incredible. A huge amount of potential there that many, many, many writers took a whack at. But then that became complicated. There were a couple of TV shows, but that became complicated legally and also continuity-wise. We stick to the continuity. DC had a continuity revamp called Crisis on Infinite Earths, and at the end of that, and the subsequent Superman reboot done by John Byrne, the new continuity said that Superman had never put on a costume as a teenager. There was no Superboy. We've revamped continuity. He puts on the costume when he becomes a man and goes to Metropolis, which left all of us Superboy fans out in the cold. We've been buying adventure comics and Superboy for decades, and all of a sudden we're told, no, that character never existed. He's been retconned out of existence. And that stayed true for a while, and then the writers at DC Comics got bored during a Coke binge and decided to kill Superman for sales, to get a chance to be on, for Tom Brokaw to mention you on the news. And while Superman was allegedly dead, 4 characters rose to take his place. And it was sort of a guessing game. The reign of the Superman was kind of a guessing game because you as a reader were wondering, well, is one of these the new Superman? Are we going to have to make our peace with one of these? Then none of them are exactly like him. And one of those 4 characters was a teenage boy. Wore a leather jacket and sunglasses and didn't appear to have Kryptonian superpowers. He had superpowers, but not Kryptonian. And because of his youth, people who first saw him on the scene in Metropolis wanted to call him Superboy, but he insisted on being called Superman until the real Superman returns in Return of Superman, and then that character got demoted, willingly became Superboy, and had his own comic book that was fairly enjoyable and went on and on. That comic lasted a while. And in the meantime, DC had a few other continuity revamps. I don't know when comic book companies became as insecure as high school teenagers, but nevertheless, they all are now. DC had a few other continuity reboots, and one of them was fairly massive. The New 52 was what it was called, that revamped every major character from the drawing board, from the ground up, and apparently relegated all of the traditional characters to some alternate realm that we were never going to see again. Fans didn't like that, as anyone could have predicted. Fans didn't like that. They hated it. And gradually, very slowly, DC came around to that fact and reintroduced the original Superman, the pre-New 52 Superman, so that briefly there were 2 Supermen in the DC continuity. And it turns out that in that alternate dimension where our Superman had gone with everybody else, with all the other characters, Superman had a child with Lois Lane. We actually see that. That's actually that moment is actually captured in an issue. And when the New 52 Superman was vaporized, as fans had been wanting him to be vaporized for a long time, the real Superman took his place, and there was a weird, convoluted little comic book soft shoe where they became one, so that the real Superman had been the New 52 Superman. Best not delved into. But the point is, suddenly we had an established DC continuity in which Superman was married and had a little boy, John Kent. And Jonathan Kent, the little boy, grew up. He grew up to be around 8 or 9 years old and developed superpowers. And for a while, DC had a great run on Superman, where Superman and Lois Lane were parents to a little boy who was learning how to be a good person, just like Clark Kent did with the Kents back in Smallville. And that character took on the name of Superboy, even though there was already another Superboy, the clone Superboy, the Return of the Superman Superboy. So now DC Comics had 2 Superboys, neither of whom was Clark Kent when he was a boy. And that's what we have here. That's going to be probably a little bit of confusion going throughout this little stack here, but that's all right. We'll manage. This is a reprint that DC Comics did. This is Superboy Giant. It's a reprint of a bunch of old adventures of the Clark Kent when he was a boy, Superboy, and the Legion of Superheroes, a group of superpowered teenagers from 1,000 years in the future who came back in time to recruit the first Superboy as a member of their team. And there's no original material in here. This is all just reprints. I grabbed it because I'm a sucker for the Legion of Superheroes. You could print pretty much anything and I would get it, at least for a little while. I don't remember what it's doing here. I have all of these issues. I don't know why I kept this collection. It has nothing original at all. Even the cover is not original. So I don't quite know why. The only thing that's original in here is the house ads. And of course the price. This was $7, which back in when I was collecting the issues that had these characters, when I was collecting the issues that are collected in this issue, $7 would have bought a steak dinner for you and a friend. So I would not have paid $7 for a comic book. Certainly not, but times change. Then this next batch, we have a batch to look at here because this is a great moment. It's this batch right here. The first thing is Nightwing. DC had an event called Rebirth. That was their kind of soft, tongue-in-cheek withdrawal from the New 52. Rebirth was basically giving readers back their traditional characters. And one of the things they did with Nightwing was to bring him back to the city of Bloodhaven that had been his stomping ground during Nightwing issues that we have seen, that fans really liked. And then another was to bring back Superman. And this is Michael Tomasi. And Michael Tomasi did the main writing here, but this is just a whole run of Superman. During a time when we're getting the adventures of Superman and his little boy, of Superman and Lois Lane and his little boy. Just a terrific run, just fantastic. Where the issues are a little convoluted. All of these things, the comic book should be one and done storylines. There shouldn't be things that go on forever like this, especially not between books where the writers can't possibly be expected to keep tabs on each other and figure out to make a seamless story. The last one here is a classic, where Superman and Batman clash because Batman has a natural son as well. Damian Wayne is his, not only the latest Robin, but also his son. So we see Superman and Batman as fathers. And it's terrific. And when, at the end of the issue, when inevitably the boys fight, they are brought up short by the most intimidating fathers that anyone could ever have. Uh-oh. And that period was wonderful. The reason I talk about it in the past tense and a little wistfully is because later DC writers, Brian Michael Bendis foremost among them, just destroyed it all, just ripped it to shreds out of petulance. They knew perfectly well, everyone that destroyed this knew perfectly well how good it was, how it should have stuck around, should have been the new normal for a long time, 20 years, 30 years. Fans loved it and would have kept buying it, but no, we want to destroy it. we still have these issues. But the reason why these are a golden moment is not because these stories were so great. They were. But the main reason that they are so great, along with that it's a golden moment along with that Nightwing issue, is because these issues were sent to me in the mail by a contact at DC Comics. One of the only contacts at DC Comics who was ever reliable for me. Sent me boxes of stuff, not only single issues, but big hardcover anthologies. I duly wrote about them. I wrote about this new run on Nightwing somewhere. And I wrote about anthologies as well. But the problem is, those contacts never stay. They just go. The name changes. You send an email the next week, and you get a form response back saying this person no longer works here. So this is one of the only times that I've ever had a reliable comic book contact to get not only single issues. I wasn't expecting any single issues, actually. I was very happy to get them, but I wasn't expecting them. But graphic novels, collections, omnibus editions, I love to write about such things, and I have a large readership, fairly large. I would think it would be in DC's best interest to help them sell these high-ticket items, but nope, DC and Marvel. It's like almost like they don't want to admit that such an avenue even exists. And of course now, in plague years, nobody would do that. But I look at these issues and the hardcover omnibus issues that I got from that DC representative a little wistfully, because I ought to be getting regular things like that. I mean, how many anthologies have I helped to sell to you just on this channel alone, without even that being my aim? But imagine if I were writing reviews of these things. But anyway, then we move on to some newer issues, because I do, in the past few years, I have gone and gotten regular issues at comic shops when there was something that interests me. One of those was when Marvel Comics got back the rights to Robert E. Howard's Conan properties, when I was getting Savage Sword of Conan and Conan the Barbarian and enjoying them. These first early issues, this is issue number 2, or no, this is Savage Sword of Conan number 1, with an Alex Ross cover, great Alex Ross cover. And I was willing, I know that a lot of the editors at Marvel these days are not only comics illiterate, but extremely arrogant. And their Comicsgate enemies rightly criticize them for thinking that they are Hollywood-style celebrities when no one knows anything about them. And they have the arrogance that goes with that. Hang on. And I knew that already, but I was willing to cut them some slack with an early issue. But there is a mistake in the issue. At the very beginning, we get the Numidian Chronicles. I've shown you an issue of the Kurt Busiek Dark Horse Conan that actually sets this up. This is a quote at the beginning of Conan the Barbarian stories. "Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities and the years of the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread out across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars. Hither came Conan the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jewel thrones of earth under his sandaled feet." And the mistake is that there's just a spelling mistake. It's the word O, O-H, instead of a capital O. It's vocative. You're addressing someone. It's not a mistake that Robert E. Howard wrote a capital O instead of the word O-H. That makes no sense in this context. Just a mistake. It's all. It's just a mistake. Someone maybe heard this and very young and looked at it maybe in an old Conan paperback or an old Conan comic book and thought, well, that's kind of odd. That should be the word O, right? And then they put it like that. I know for a fact that Marvel Comics got many letters on that subject, many emails. I sent one, but I know for a fact they got emails from many other Conan fans wishing the best for this relaunch of Marvel Conan, wanting it to succeed, going out and buying variant issues, going out and pre-ordering collections and whatnot. They wanted it to succeed. They were not enemies of this at all. But every single one of those emails pointed out the same thing. Great issue, fantastic artwork, great pacing, great writing. Oh, and by the way, there's a mistake at the very beginning. If you don't know Conan, you maybe wouldn't know it, but nevertheless, it's easy to fix. There's a mistake at the very beginning. It isn't O-H, it's capital O. If you want to check what Robert E. Howard wrote, if you want to check the previous Marvel Comics run of Conan, if you want to check the Dark Horse run of Conan, if you want to check any of the Conan novels, you will see it's not O-H, it's capital O. And I wrote as well, and I praised the issue, and I said that same thing, and then I waited. These things are 6 months ahead of time. I waited. And Marvel's Conan comics are still coming out with that mistake. The editors at Marvel saw those emails and thought, Bunch of incels. Who cares? It's just a comic book. We're going to do it this way. And screw you. A tiny little thing, but very illustrative. And I think that the Conan comics got a little worse, especially when he was integrated into the Avengers. Conan is a gigantic hulking guy with a sword. Okay, he has a panache in his own pre-world, but in a world of superpowers. Anyway, the artwork was great in the Savage Avengers, but I got a really good taste of what modern Marvel editorial board is like by the fact that error is still there. There's no judgment call here. There's no way to look at it and say, well, you could say that it's not an error if you think this, and this. No, it's just wrong, and you're keeping it because you did it that way originally. Very annoying. And then we have two other relatively modern issues. These are from Vertigo, and it's a long-running series called Astro City. Again, we have great Alex Ross covers. Astro City it's written by Kurt Busiek, and it's old now. It's had some fantastic moments. It's Kurt Busiek's sort of running homage to all superhero comics. Marvel, DC, Fawcett, everybody. With all sorts of cliches and larger plot lines and gimmicks and all rewashed, reworked, rethought about in a truly wonderful way. Astro City is just truly wonderful. These are standalone issues. When Astro City was relaunched, that's what you got. You got standalone issues, and they are fantastic. I have a few more of them, but I really need to get a big collection of these recent Astro Cities, because that would be worth rereading. I've noticed that about Astro City is that a great many of them are worth rereading. So, and then we have our last thing, which we have seen on this channel before. We're going all the way back to the 70s. 1973. This is Defenders number 10. This is right before the climax of the Avengers Defenders War, a comic plotline that sprawled between the Avengers comic and the Defenders comic, and had these two big super teams fighting each other at first before they team up. And these are the Defenders right there: the Hulk, Doctor Strange, Prince Namor the Submariner, the Valkyrie, the Silver Surfer, Hawkeye at this point, and the Avengers were the normal run: Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, the Vision, Mantis, Black Panther. And at first, the way that the powers that be, Steve Englehart and company, did this was to have a whole bunch of issues alternate between Avengers and Defenders where the teams fight each other. And we've seen all of those, where the Submariner fights Captain America, two World War II holdovers, where Mantis and the Black Panther fight Doctor Strange, where the Swordsman fights the Valkyrie, both of them use swords, that sort of thing. But the whole time that was happening, Iron Man fights Hawkeye. Hawkeye originally appeared as a villain in an Iron Man comic. But the whole time that was happening, fans were clamoring and writing letters, in this case not emails, writing letters saying, well, the biggest fight of all here will be Thor versus the Hulk. And Marvel knew that and saved it for the end. Here we get this classic John Romita Sr. cover. Look at that. And we get, the issue doesn't disappoint. Thor and the Hulk duke it out for 8 pages. Before they are interrupted by the two teams, who in the meantime have learned that they are both being played as dupes and that they need to cooperate. So the first half of this issue I have read many, 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 many times, where Thor and the Hulk just bash into each other on a city street. I have my own fan favorite here. The comic, this is written by Steve Englehart, yes, and the comic shows us the fandom. See, there's one kid rooting for Thor and another rooting for the Hulk. I was rooting for Thor, of course. Thor's fought super strong and invulnerable beings for 2,000 years. The Hulk should not give him any trouble at all, but nevertheless, I loved the issue, absolutely loved it. And this has been collected many, many times. I have Avengers Defenders collections in an Avengers omnibus, a Defenders omnibus. It's been collected as its own trade paperback. I have that as well, but I still love this issue. I still love this issue. And that's it. That is your Comic Book Wednesday. Not new issues still, but that day I assume is creeping closer. I assume that it is. All the comic shops in Boston are open. it's just the one that I would go to is not. I would have to go to that comic shop, look around, and then turn on my heel and walk back. Just come back to Hyde Cottage. There's nothing that I can fold into it along the way, and I like to do that. As if you haven't gotten that impression already on this channel, I like to fold in my errands. But anyway, that's your comics for today. We'll see. We'll do this again on Friday. I'm working my way through another of my cardboard long boxes, so I'm going to wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.